Hello there once again and welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us today. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And this is an issue I guess we've really never explored fully. We've done some counseling before, but never a story on psychology.
Well, that's right. So all of you that are at home can lay down on your couch because we're about to talk and get you analyzed. No, we're going to be talking about psychology today with one of the preeminent psychologists here in Oklahoma, if not the Southwest. Dr. Stewart Beasley is going to be with us. And he's going to talk about his practice and what he does and how he does it and things that he has learned in the process over many years.
Should be an interesting show. It's today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Well, prices at the pump are hitting new highs this week. In other news,
gasoline is expected to top $4 a gallon this week.
expect drivers seeing sticker shock at the pump.
OPEC has raised the price of oil again, and Wall Street worries.
Well, a full tank of gas is going to set drivers back.
Straight ahead, the latest news on
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stewart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Stewart Beasley, a practicing psychologist here in Oklahoma, offices I think in the Edmond, Oklahoma City area. Dr. Beasley did his undergraduate work at University of Central Oklahoma, did his PhD work in psychology at the University of Colorado. He has been in practice, practicing psychologist, doing it every day since 1976. He also is an adjunct professor, a very busy one. He has taught basically at most of the universities here in Oklahoma, OSU, OU, UCO, OCU, and some other letters probably that I can't come up with right now. He has had experiences that we'll want to talk to him about in a number of citywide or statewide trauma events. He's been involved in counseling folks that were in need after the Edmond postal shooting, after the Murrah bombing and other similar instances. The tornadoes that we've had always produce folks that in need of counseling, and Dr. Beasley's been involved in that. He's got a lot of life experiences that we want to hear about, and we want to hear about what is a normal, if there is such a thing, day in the life of a psychologist. So we're really pleased to welcome to The Verdict Dr. Stewart Beasley.
Thank you. Pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Doctor, I've seen enough Peanuts cartoon strips to know that Lucy started practicing at a very early age, but most kids don't grow up wanting to be a psychologist. What's your story? When did you first think that that's what I want to do?
You know, I never wanted to be a psychologist. I always wanted to be...
Well, it's too late now.
I know. I think I'm there. And she charges a nickel, and I get a little bit more than that now.
Glad to hear it.
You know, I think that my interest in psychology started when I was a public school teacher. I started off as an 8th grade science teacher in Edmond school systems many years ago.
Well, that's a psychology major in itself.
Absolutely. Right? And I really loved teaching those kids. And I loved interacting with adolescents. And so I thought, I'd like to be a guidance counselor. That seemed like the thing to go. That was the next thing to do. And so as fate had it, I ended up in Colorado and got snowed in one spring break. And so I decided to talk to some friends of mine who were teachers there, and they said, why don't you go interview for a job? I did. I got a job in Jefferson County, Colorado, which is just the west side of Denver. Golden is the county seat. Taught there. I had to take a couple of classes to finish up my master's degree back at UCO, and so I took the classes at the University of Colorado Denver Center, which at that time was a separate center, and found a professor that really encouraged me and nurtured me and said, I think you'd be good at going into psychology. And so that's the direction that I took, and so I stayed in Colorado, finished my degree, and came back home to Oklahoma.
It must have been years that took place, though, in between.
Well, not a lot. I finished my PhD. I was in a hurry. I don't know why, because of all the mountains and everything, but I finished my PhD 2 years to the day that I started. Usually it takes about 4 or 5. Then I had an internship that I had to do, which was another year. But at any rate, I came back to Oklahoma and started teaching at the University of Central Oklahoma and was in the psychology department there for about 15 years. And realized that while I was teaching these students, it had been a while since I'd actually done counseling. And so I thought, well, I really need to get back into the field. And so I got licensed as a psychologist, which I thought would probably take a while, and didn't take as long as I thought, and started practicing on the weekends. And then eventually took a leave from my classes at UCO and went into practice full time. So that's how I got there.
You had some interesting notes on a resume I read about you, about your work in Edmond at when the postal shooting took place and a number of folks were killed.
That was the first time I ever got involved with crisis counseling. I mean, I had studied it and we had done a little of the crisis kind of things in my internship, but with this terrible shooting that occurred in Edmond, that was the first time that I had ever been firsthand and up close to the kind of tragedy that little did we know at that time was going to continue.
Yeah.
And it was only a couple of weeks later after that we had the terrible tornado that hit the west side of Edmond. And so while I was trying to work with some of the survivors and their families of that shooting in Edmond at the post office, I was also trying to help people whose homes had been blown away. And so it was a really intensive, in-depth type of experience for me to realize that there's going to be a need for this, and so I had to start learning a whole new area of psychology that I'd not been familiar with before.
In other words, from your training all the way through a PhD, you hadn't been exposed particularly to that sort of thing.
No, I've been trained to go, I understand, tell me more, how does that affect you? And all of a sudden—
That's how Mick is mayor, by the way.
It works for you.
Yeah.
But not in the crisis intervention. I mean, you have people that are really hurting and they're overwhelmed by the stress that has occurred. And you really have to get in there and address things more directly than just sit there and listen. Although part of it is listening to people talk about what they were going through and what their experiences were.
Well, aren't we seeing a lot more of that today?
Sure seems like it.
With the wars going on and the soldiers coming back and the families of the soldiers and the like. Hardly a day goes by or a week goes by without some sort of tragic event.
Right.
And these letters, PTSD, are thrown around a lot by people like me who don't really know what they mean or what they, I know what they mean, but I don't know how to identify them beyond that. Are you seeing a lot of that?
I am seeing a lot of that. And post-traumatic stress disorder, the PTSD, we originally associated with wars, things that happened that you had a traumatic stress and that it played out in your life later on. And we're finding now that not only is the stress related to things such as battle and war, but it's also related to children being kidnapped, to people being raped, to people seeing awful, terrible things happen before them, like the bombings and the tornadoes. And so we find that a lot of people, not just military personnel, are coming back and coming in with what we call post-traumatic stress disorders. And it's a terrible thing that we didn't even recognize for a number of years. In fact, my father was a World War II prisoner of war. And when Dad came back, I was an infant, but when he came back and growing up, he never spoke about the war. He never spoke about the things he saw. And as I grew in my career, I understood why he didn't talk about it, because that was a post-traumatic stress disorder. And he certainly had lots of stresses that I just associated with that's Dad. And as a result of this, a lot of people are now understanding more about what people went through in all the wars, as well as our most recent conflicts that we've had that soldiers are coming back from.
If a student started today and went through the undergraduate curriculum, the master's curriculum, the PhD curriculum in psychology, I take it they would get some instruction in this that they didn't get back when you were.
Right. We didn't even discuss it at that time, and now it's taught as a regular part of the coursework, particularly as it comes to human behavior and personality development.
I would think a lot of times you have a patient who is patient the right word?
Yes.
Okay. You have a patient who doesn't want to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Or has trouble talking. How do you get them to open up?
You know, I get people who are sent to me by a spouse or by an employer or by, in some cases, a professional board that's found them needing some therapy that they don't want. And when they come in, I try and tell people that refer them, if you'll get them in the first time, I can get them in the second time. And it's usually by just saying, tell me your story. Tell me why you're here. And a lot of times it goes by with, I don't know why I'm here. Well, why do you think other people think that you need to be here? And then it's a matter of listening. It's a matter of building trust. It's a matter of just reflecting back what they say until they're ready to talk about, pardon me, ready to talk about their issue that's there.
And, you know, and these issues that they are experiencing or don't want to face are very real.
And they're very traumatic. And a lot of people feel that if they just don't talk about it, it'll go away. And what happens is it gets worse. They have nightmares, they have sleep disturbances. A lot of times they have disturbed interpersonal relationships. They can't get along with people. They get into trouble at work. Some of them start self-medicating by drinking too much or using drugs, or sometimes get into sex addictions that we've heard about. And so when people come in to see me, they're usually recognizing that there's something that's not working, but they don't know what to do to help change that outcome. And I just use the example with them of, we're going into the jungle. And I don't know exactly where we're going, but I know the jungle, I know how to get you through it. And when we come out on the other side, we'll both be surprised at where we are, but we're going to get there. It's going to work okay. It's just going to take time and a cooperative effort between the two of us.
Dr. Stewart Beasley is our guest. We'll be right back on The Verdict.
The thing that has made the most sense for me is realizing that I am still an educator, and that is what I do at the Chickasaw Nation. I'm Dr. Amanda Cobb-Greetham. I'm a historian, and I'm Chickasaw. The Chickasaw Cultural Center is amazing. It is a very, very special place devoted to the sharing and to the celebration of Chickasaw history and culture. State-of-the-art technology, exhibits that are not like anything I've ever seen. The Spirit Forest is incredible, and you feel as if you have actually just walked into a forest with huge trees all around you. It's timeless, and yet it's sort of also representative of our time depth, to really just sort of reach through time and touch the past. By the end of the exhibits, you really have a sense of Chickasaw cultural and political resurgence and the extent to which we are a healthy, dynamic, and vital tribe today. Chickasaws have always been an inclusive people. This is something for the whole community and for the state of Oklahoma.
I don't want to hope for the best. I want to become it.
I want you to see my potential.
Because I can be more than average. I can be amazing.
Because I know the hard way
and the right way
are one and the same.
I will make you proud.
And surpass even my own expectations.
I will lead.
I will lead.
I will lead America's energy future.
Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry. Proud to equip Oklahoma students for greatness.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
Psychologist Dr. Stewart Beasley is our guest today on The Verdict. What's the most rewarding aspect of your profession?
You know, I work with all ages. I work with adolescents, I work with couples, I work with families, I work with elderly people. I think the most rewarding thing I find is when people leave and they do get better, they don't keep seeing me forever, and they're able to go out and face some of the issues that they couldn't face previously, and that they have coping skills that they hadn't been able to develop or use before, and then they go out and they teach them to other people. And they become sort of a spokesperson for mental health because they now believe in counseling, they now believe in psychology, whereas they might have been skeptical when they came in the first place.
You just outlined the folks that you serve on a regular basis in your private practice. If you could, is there a certain age group that is the most difficult to deal with, from adolescents to young adults to middle-aged to older folks? Is there some age group that you find more difficult to deal with than others, where changes are more dramatic, I guess I should say?
You know, I love working with each group and each population. I've been working with adolescents for many years, and the problems that they experience are much different now than they were when I began.
Really?
And there's much more pathology. For example, we're experiencing a run on suicides in adolescence, which really trouble me, because it tells me that some of these young people are not getting the help that they need, or not getting the support that they need other places. At the same time, we're also finding more suicides occurring in elderly people. A lot of people who become hopeless and helpless and feel as if nobody really cares about them. And the isolation of being elderly and living by themselves is a very great problem too. So I find those two populations, while they're diverse, really have some similarities. Sure. So I really enjoy working with those groups, and I enjoy the problem solving in all the groups. I mean, it's sort of like, what's going on here? What do we need to do? How do we start figuring out how to help this person? But I can't say there's any one group that I enjoy working with more than the other.
Who should see a psychologist and who should see a psychiatrist?
Well, psychiatrists primarily work with people who have some sort of biochemical disorder that requires medication. Doesn't mean that psychiatrists don't talk to people, but for the most part they prefer to see the person, monitor their medications and that sort of thing. And one of the things that's happened over the course of my career is we now have more and more medications that are very effective, have fewer side effects, are very helpful in moving people out of their depression or bipolar disorder or whatever they might have. And so I think that a lot of psychologists work hand in hand with psychiatrists, as well as with the general practitioners and other medical professionals, in overseeing the medications and using those. So I think if someone has a biochemical problem that's been diagnosed, and sometimes depression can be biochemical, sometimes it's situational, sometimes depression, anxiety, bipolar disorders, certainly the more severe disorders, the psychoses, schizophrenia, sometimes post-traumatic stress disorder, people also need medication. So that would call for a psychiatrist. If they are not sure, they could talk to a psychologist, and then what I would do is refer them to a psychiatrist with whom I work or with whom I usually exchange referrals.
And it seems to me that many health insurance policies now cover some level of consultation, or psychologist or psychiatrist. Can you talk through that? What's covered, what's not typically?
Yes, that's another battle I've been fighting for a long time, not by myself, but with other people. We've been trying to get psychology to be covered under most health insurance policies. Unfortunately, today they are. And it's due to some legislation that occurred at the federal level, which was essentially to say that if you are having a mental disorder, that you should be covered under health insurance just as any other physical illness should be covered. And it used to be that if you had someone who had a mental disorder that was hospitalized, for example, they might stay for 2 or 3 months. We don't do that any longer. We try and get people in, stabilized, and out. But most people's insurance will cover basic treatment and even basic hospitalization if necessary. It's against the law in Oklahoma to refuse to provide services of a mental health basis under a health insurance policy.
Your practice has changed over the years dramatically. How do you keep up with changing trends, new ideas? Does your teaching actually help you in that regard?
You know, it's changing daily, not just, almost by the hour it seems. And as we look at research that comes out and so on, we have to look at what methods are effective. With the changing healthcare administration that we have now, the emphasis is upon getting people in, getting them treated, and getting them out. And so we don't want to just throw pills at them or medications at them. We have to look at ways that actually work. And so my teaching requires me to do lots of reading of journals, lots of reading of books, talking to other professionals. I go to continuing education courses all the time, finding out what's going on. So if I were going to graduate school today, it would be much different than the graduate school I went to in my day, because the nature of mental health coverage and treatment is much different.
What's some of the more interesting experiences you've had?
Well, I think certainly working with the Murrah bombing situation was something that's really impressed a lot upon me. I think working with some of the school districts around that have had suicides within their school, I've gone in and worked with teachers on that way. I've also had the privilege of serving on the State Board of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I think that came about because of my interest in mental health and looking at how we could administer it more effectively. Currently, I'm on the licensing board for Psychologist, and so I'm now serving the public interest, trying to help protect them from unethical or unprofessional people that might be in the field. Everything that I do, I enjoy getting up and going to work every day, because the problems that I see and the difficulties I see and the people I see are all different, and I really get enthused about it, and I like to do that sort of thing.
Any idea how many of the cases from the Murrah building bombing are still in progress, or most people left your care?
I think, well, everybody that I was working with has left my care. Many of them left the state and went elsewhere, and so they may be getting mental health coverage elsewhere. I think because we were available, and when I say we, the mental health field, the whole profession, master's level, doctoral level, psychiatrists, I think because we met the needs of those people, I think most of them were able to go through their issues and work on and only come back periodically for checkups. I still see one or two people, maybe once a year, that come back in that are still having some PTSD from the Murrah bombing. And it always gets worse around the time of year that we celebrate the anniversary, because it brings it all back. People have to revisit that too.
I suppose the family doctor is an important person that might recognize when a patient of that doctor needs some psychological help that the doctor can't provide.
Absolutely.
And isn't trained to do so. Are med schools doing a good enough job today in giving our new doctors, MDs,
yes,
training that they need?
I think they are. I think they're helping people recognize who are going into medicine, primary practice, family practice, that sort of thing, that so many of the physical illnesses that they're treating also have a behavioral basis. For example, we're finding more and more people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes means you really have to watch your diet. It means that you really have to look at how you live your life. You have to increase exercise. And there are people who just are not going to do that. And a lot of mainstream private practice physicians will refer people to me and say, could you help me get this person compliant? We also find that a lot of psychologists are found on transplant teams, where we look at liver transplants, kidney transplants, heart transplants, because certainly you want to make sure that if you're going to the trouble and give a person a heart or a kidney or lungs or whatever we give them, that they're also going to be compliant with their medication and their lifestyle. And some of them don't. Some of them go into deep depression after they've had a heart transplant or a kidney transplant. And so they require psychological follow-up. But I think our medical schools are doing a good job of training people.
Dr. Stewart Beasley, our guest today on The Verdict. Thanks so much for coming in.
We need to get you back.
Thank you.
We didn't have enough time.
Kent and I will have a final word when we return.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We are a very conservative family, and we believe in old-fashioned family values. We have a loving home there, and we love kids, and we have 5, 6 of our own. And but I had no idea we were going to go into adoption, but it's been very gratifying.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Dr. Stewart Beasley, our guest today.
Yes, a fine gentleman doing great work.
He certainly is, and he has a website we'd love to draw your attention to. It is, quite simply, drstewartbeasley.com. That's D-R-S-T-E-W-A-R-T, then B-E-A-S-L-E-Y, drstewartbeasley.com. We have a website, too. We'd love you to go there and talk about a show that you'd like to see on an upcoming edition of The Verdict. That website is theverdict.tv. So head there and jot us a line about the show or a show you'd like to see. That's going to do it for this edition of The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We will see you next week with another guest and another show, and I hope you'll join us.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.